This video is about how Research Triangle Park in North Carolina is changing forever. You know, there is over $7 billion in development that just got approved for Research Triangle Park, and most buyers have no idea what's coming our way. This is the first major change in 65 years. Biogen committed $2 billion to the park, and Novartis added $771 million. And a park that was just offices and parking lots is turning into restaurants, hotels, and real places to live. So today I'm breaking down what RTP 3.0 means and which neighborhoods it will touch and where the smart money is moving before the new information hits the comps. So let's talk about what RTP was versus what it's becoming. Now, all right, let me set the stage here because this really is a big change. Most Triangle residents think of Research Triangle Park as that place that you pass on I-40 where a lot of people work. There's just big office buildings there, trees, parking lots, and it's somewhere you may work, but you definitely don't want to live there. And actually, Research Triangle Park is mostly asphalt. 1 out of every 5 acres out there is just parking lots. Now that can sound lame, like nobody thought this through. However, it was exactly what this place was intended when it was started in the late 1950s. Back then, North Carolina was struggling. We were near the bottom in income compared to the rest of the Southeast. So leaders here were trying to solve serious problems in the economy, and they needed jobs, they needed companies, they needed credibility. So Governor Luther Hodges and a group of business leaders chose this big stretch of farmland between Raleigh and Durham, right in the middle of Duke, NC State University, and UNC at Chapel Hill. And the plan was simple. They wanted to put major companies next to top research universities and let innovation blossom. And it worked very well. IBM showed up in 1965, and that gave the whole thing credibility. From there, it kept growing. And today, we're talking about 7,000 acres, close to 400 companies, and around 55,000 employees working in our park. Our park generates about $25 billion a year for North Carolina's economy, helping make RTP one of the most important job centers in the entire country. So now the entire design was built around cars and office buildings. You could work there, but you couldn't live there. And it was not built for residential development. There was just a few restaurants and very little retail. And instead, you had hundreds of acres of parking because every single morning, thousands of people drove in, worked all day, and drove back out to their homes in the suburbs at night. So by 5 o'clock, the park turns dark, quiet, and empty. And that made perfect sense in 1959, but it doesn't fit 2026. Companies today are competing for talent from places like New York, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, and that talent expects something very different. They want to walk to coffee shops and live near their work. They want energy and a community and not just a campus you commute to and from every day. But what's happening right here, right now, is the biggest shift RTP has seen since it was created. Just a few months ago, in November 25, RTP 3.0 got final approval, and for the first time in 65 years, mixed-use development is now allowed across all 7,000 acres in the park. That unlocks over $7 billion in development across the Triangle, and it means thousands of apartments, hotels, restaurants, and retail. And it means the core of the Triangle's economy is about to turn into something people actually want to be in after 5 o'clock workday is over. The kind of density that we've seen development with great success in other places like North Hills or Fenton, except this time it's inside Research Triangle Park. And this is already underway, and once you see how fast this timeline is moving, you'll understand why this changes and affects everything for the Triangle real estate market. Speaking of what's already happening inside RTP, if you're considering a move to the Triangle and want to understand how this affects your home search, I've worked with buyers and sellers across our market every day and can give you a true picture of what neighborhoods make the most sense for your situation. My contact information is in the description below. below. So now back to the timeline you can expect. This change was approved with 96% of the companies inside RTP voting in favor of changing the rules that kept the park zoned for office only from the beginning. And almost every company that could vote actually did vote in favor of this change. So in a world where businesses usually argue over everything, that kind of agreement tells you how ready they were for this shift. But this didn't happen overnight. The Research Triangle Foundation started working on this around 2021. They held more than 120 meetings with companies, landowners, both counties, and 3 universities that were involved. So they were studying other innovation districts across our country, and they brought in planners. They did their homework quietly for years. And then in January 25, the vote passed, bringing the first big covenant change in 65 years. Wake County approved as part of zoning framework in mid-25. Durham County gave final approval on November 25, and both counties voted yes. And wait until you see the billions that were just committed here, because that's a big part of why this change is even possible. I'll show you that in just a bit, so stay with me. Now, the new zoning officially took place on January 1st, 2026, and by mid-26, developers should start submitting applications. So this is brand new. This literally just got approved. But even before all these approvals were finished, one project inside RTP was already proving that this idea works. Let's take a look at the Hub at RTP. It's clear proof of the concept. The Hub at RTP is the project that proved to skeptics that this idea could actually take hold and succeed. But after all of that, they still needed to figure out one thing: whether people would actually want to live and spend time inside Research Triangle Park. For 65 years, this place was offices and parking lots. So changing that mindset wasn't easy. And that's why Hub RTP came into play to test the idea. Hub RTP sits on about 100 acres right in the middle of the park, and it's a $1.5 billion mixed-use development that started construction in 2020. It's even won the Best Development Project Award in 2025. So when you look at what they're building there, you begin to see why. By the time it's finished, Hub RTP will have about 1 million square feet of office and lab space, but there's also about 1,200 apartments planned. And on top of that, a Renaissance hotel from Marriott with over 200 rooms is already under construction. And then you've got about 50,000 square feet of new restaurants and retail, 16 acres of parks and green space, and about 20 miles of RTP trails that connect right into this development. That's how it started to feel more like a real neighborhood. Now people are already living there, and the first residential community opened in late October of 2024. It's called MAA Nixie, and it became the first ever built community inside Research Triangle Park. It has more than 400 apartments, from studios all the way up to 2-bedroom units. And they didn't hold back on the amenities either. There's a resort-style pool, an EV charging. The fitness center features a climbing wall, and residents will find co-working spaces and a podcast studio. And they'll also have access to e-bikes, and of course there's a dog park. And this is just the start, because developers are already planning a second apartment community. Soon you will see which neighborhoods around RTP will benefit the most from this shift, because most buyers still haven't caught it yet. We'll get to there in a minute. Now the food scene is going to get attention too. The News and Observer even called Horseshoe at the Hub at RTP a major food and retail hub. Drift Coffee is open every day, and there's also a boutique from James Beard, semifinalist, and a contemporary Indian restaurant that opened late last year. And more is coming in 2026, including a well-known New York pizza spot, a restaurant from a top chef contestant, and a steakhouse from another James Beard semifinalist. That's how Hub RTP proved this concept works. And now that this new zoning is approved across the entire park, this kind of development can start showing up all over those 7,000 acres. But the clearest sign that big changes are really coming didn't show up in an announcement. It came from one of RTP's oldest companies making a very clear move. And here's what's happened. We call it the IBM Signal. Now let's talk about IBM for a minute, because this move gave the market a clear signal. IBM has been in Research Triangle Park since 1965. They were one of the first big tech companies to come here, and honestly, they helped put RTP on the map. And they still have a big presence here. Around 8,000 IBM employees are based here in the Triangle. So when they make a move, people pay attention. In October of 25, right around the time the final RTP 3.0 approvals were coming through, IBM confirmed it was consolidating most of the Triangle workforce out of the large Cornwallis Road campus. That campus covers about 400 acres. Instead, employees moved into a different group of buildings inside RTP, and those buildings had already been sold in late 2023 to a developer called Hines. Now, the deal was about $66 million, done as a sale leaseback. Now, Hines isn't some random real estate company. That's why it's a big deal. They're behind Fenton and Cary, that 92-acre mixed-use district. They also built the Market District at American Tobacco in downtown Durham, and this is exactly what they specialize in, building the kind of live workplaces RTP 3.0 is meant to create. The Hines team has already said publicly that a lot of redevelopment options are on the table for that property, including residential. Now that RTP 3.0 allows housing inside the park, that kind of change is fully possible. The campus IBM is leaving behind is huge. The land alone is worth over $170 million. And the buildings sitting on it were previously assessed at more than $225 million. And when you add it up, the entire campus comes out to a net worth of about $400 million. The Research Triangle Foundation confirmed they are already discussing the long-term future of that campus. So people in the industry are calling it one of the biggest land redevelopment opportunities in the country. And we're talking about more than 400 acres sitting right in the center of North Carolina's innovation economy. So when a 60-year-old anchor like IBM moves in that direction, it's a big signal to our area. And once you see the new investments that companies started announcing after RTP 3.0 got approved, you start to realize how big this shift could be. Let's talk about the money. Here's the number that really puts this into perspective. $25.1 billion. That's the current economic impact of Research Triangle Park on North Carolina's annual economy. And that's before a single RTP 3.0 project has even started. And now when you add several billion more from companies expanding here, and you begin to see how big this momentum really could be. Take Biogen. They've been in the Triangle since 1995, and over time, they've invested about $10 billion in North Carolina's economy. And then in July of 25, they committed another $2 billion to expand manufacturing right here in RTP. That expansion includes different facilities across Durham and Morrisville with about 1,500 employees plus 400 contractors. So they are clearly doubling down on their initial investment here. Then Novartis made a major announcement in November 2025, the same month that Durham County gave final approval to RTP 3.0. They committed over $770 million for a new manufacturing hub across Durham and Wake counties. That project is expected to create about 700 jobs by the end of 2030, plus more than 3,000 indirect jobs. And the new facilities are expected to open in 2027 and 2028. And those are just the biggest announcements. Companies like Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Regeneron, and Roche have also laid out plans to invest in North Carolina. The life sciences industry here already generates more than $80 billion a year, and the goal is to push that number to $100 billion by 2030. And I'll show you why that could actually be such a huge advantage for homeowners, so stay with me. Now, it's not just companies expanding. Infrastructure is moving too. The Triangle Mobility Hub is a new transit center being built inside RTP that secured a $25 million federal grant. Total funding is now over $58 million. So construction is expected to start in 2027 and the hub opening about 2028 or 29. And at the same time, the total completion of 540 is moving forward. That's the Outer Beltline project around Raleigh with a total cost of around $2.5 billion. Phase 1 is already open and Phase 2 is expected to finish in late 2028. Once that loop closes, commute times across the southern and the western parts of Wake County will change for the better. And when you step back and add all of this up and everything else coming into our region, it's more than $7 billion moving into this area in a very short window. And a lot of that is already announced, committed, or under construction, which brings us to what a lot of Triangle homeowners and buyers are thinking about right now, and that's what will this do to home prices? The impact on real estate from this project is real. Here's the thing, I've lived in Raleigh for years and I've watched this place change a lot. What used to feel like a mid-sized southern capital has grown into one of the fastest growing metros in our country. And here's something I'll tell almost every buyer who comes here from places like Philly or Washington, D.C. or Atlanta. And the commute times here will blow your mind. The average one-way commute in the Triangle is about 23 minutes. If you tried to drive the same distance in Atlanta or DC, you could easily be looking at up to 2 hours. So people who have lived with that kind of traffic really don't take 23 minutes for granted. And as RTP keeps changing, being close to the park starts to matter even more. So Wake County has over 1 million people today and is adding about 50 new residents every single day. The Raleigh-Cary Metro has grown more than 10% since 2020 alone. People are moving here from the Northeast, the Midwest, California, Florida, and we're also seeing a big wave of international tech workers coming specifically because of RTP. So it's worth looking at which areas sit closest to that growth. Morrisville is about 10 to 15 minutes from RTP. And it's already one of the most diverse communities in the Triangle, with a lot of tech workers who chose that area because it's close to the park. Homes right now run around mid-3s to the low 6s. As RTP continues to expand, places like Morrisville are likely to feel that demand shift pretty quickly. Now, Cary is the Triangle's largest suburb and already sits on a higher price points, usually from the high 5s up to the 6s. Part of that comes from being close to RTP and SAS Institute, but that pricing has strong reasons to hold and potentially even move higher with this expansion. So then you have Durham neighborhoods near RTP, those areas that are starting to feel a shift too as the park becomes more of a destination instead of just somewhere that people go to work. Southern Durham in particular has often been priced lower than you might expect for how close it is to the major employment centers. And then there's southern Wake County, places like Holly Springs, Fuquay-Varina, and Garner. For a time, these areas were limited by longer commute times, but when the complete 540 is here, it will shorten the drive both to RTP and to downtown Raleigh quite a bit. Homes in those communities today typically range from the low 300s to the mid 5s, depending on the neighborhood. So for buyers thinking 3 to 5 years ahead, that's some of the most interesting value in our entire metro. And the market right now actually favors buyers in a way that we haven't seen for many years. Inventory is at a multi-year high. Homes are sitting on the market a bit longer. Many sellers are more willing to negotiate. So there is a window right now where you can buy before all of this gets fully priced into our housing market. And the best thing buyers can do is to see what's happening early before everybody else catches on. That leads to the reality check a lot of Triangle residents still haven't fully processed yet. So when you ask the average Triangle resident what they know about RTP, most of the time you'll hear the same thing. It's that place off 540 where people go to work. For a lot of people, RTP still looks like 1995. And until fairly recently, that wasn't totally wrong. But they don't have any idea about what's going on now. And they don't realize that you can actually live inside RTP now. And they haven't heard much about the hub at RTP, and they still assume that the same rules from decades ago are still in place. So most people have no clue that $7 billion in corporate and infrastructure investment is committed and moving forward. And honestly, it's easy to see why, because most of these changes happen pretty quietly. The covenant updates, the county approvals, the corporate commitments, a lot of that came together in about a year. And the idea behind all of this is pretty simple: creating a place where work, restaurants, parks, and daily life are all close together and accessible. Right now, there's still a gap between what many people think RTP is and what it is building for the future. And after years in real estate, I can tell you something: gaps like this don't usually stay open for very long. Companies voted 96% to change their rules. The counties approved it. Billions of dollars are already coming into RTP. The key now is seeing where this is evolving before the market fully prices in the expansion. If you want to talk about how this affects your timeline and which neighborhoods make the most sense for your situation, shoot me an email at marti@martihampton.com today. Let's have a real conversation. I've linked a video right here breaking down Raleigh's biggest mega projects. If RTP 3.0 got your attention, that one is really going to surprise you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.